Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Foxpunter Manager Profiling. Once again, we'll be providing an in-depth look at two of the English game's current incumbents of the dugout, and with the help of the myers-briggs model, we'll be focusing on personality types, comparing leadership styles, and working out why key decisions were made and how they affect the day-to-day operations on the training ground. My name is Jack Critchley, but the man to put some managerial meat on the bone is Foxpunter's Mike Holden. Mike, how are you?
Yeah, all good, thanks, Jack. Glad you gave me the heads up on what we're about to talk about at the beginning of this week's episode.
Yeah, at 10 a.m. this morning, I was thinking about the record and I was thinking, God, I don't know what I'm going to ask Mike in the first section when we react to what's happened during the week. And, you always go back and check as well and think, well, it's been a busy week. Have I missed something? Turns out I hadn't. But what happened since and subsequently, we've had two departures in League Two, Mike. We've had David Dunn sacked at Barrow this afternoon, and just a few hours previously, Stuart McCall gone at Bradford. And based on recent results, neither are particularly surprising, are they?
No, I wouldn't say so. The David Dunn one did catch me a little bit by surprise. I didn't realise just how bad their results have become in the last few weeks. But the Stuart McCall one seems like it's been brewing for a few weeks now, and it was a surprise when he got a contract extension just a few weeks ago. There's a change of a new chief executive's gone in, and I think his first job was to hand McCall a new contract as kind of a show of confidence, which seemed like a bold but strong move at the time. But nothing's changed, and I think the fans are getting seriously worried, and so they should be. A club of Bradford stature in the position that they're in, it kind of leaves questions now about Stuart McCall's basically his track record as a whole, because he had that one fantastic season in League One with Bradford, but south of the border, all his best achievements have been in Scotland, and south of the border, his record now, as we look at it today, leaves a lot to be desired.
But no doubt, whoever comes in to replace him when they're sacked in 12 months' time, McCall will be parachuted back in. That seems to be how it works at Bradford.
Well, yeah, was this his third stint? So, yeah, I'd be surprised now, actually, if McCall gets back in soon. He's sounded like a manager recently that has potentially, he kind of just going through the motions a little bit. I'm not really sure. He seems short of answers in his interviews. He does give good interviews. You can tell he's, the proverbial proper football man, because, you can tell there's loads of streetwise experience there, but it's not been making a difference at all. It doesn't seem, as much as he sounds like he knows what avenues to explore in his interviews, knowing the avenues to explore and coming up with the answers are two different things. And I think that's where he's fallen short.
Yeah, and in terms of David Dunn, we know less about him because his stint, I guess, has been briefer as a manager, but he seemingly made Barrow hard to beat at the start of the season, but they've just kind of gone backwards, really, haven't they? And I guess if Barrow have any hopes of booking that second season in the Football League, then they've got to make the change now, really, haven't they?
Yeah, possibly when you look at the table. I mean, when the appointment was first made in the summer, I didn't fancy it at all. I didn't think he'd do particularly well. So relative to those expectations, we're only going back 4 or 5 weeks ago, but I thought he was doing okay at that stage. There's only been 2 wins all season, which is obviously the major sticking point, which has now turned the recent run of defeats into, his position becoming untenable. But my concern with Dunn prior to the season was the fact that his post-playing career, he's just chopped and changed. Sort of, he's gone from coaching to running businesses outside of football, becoming an agent, getting back in as a coach, just working a few days a week. And then all of a sudden he's caretaker manager at Blackpool. And on the back of that, he's suddenly manager at Barrow. And I was thinking, there's not much continuity here and compound effects of what he's done since his career finished. So that I was really concerned for him on that level. I didn't think it'd be a good fit. I think it was just a big name former player just thinking, I'll have a go at management again and see how I take to it this time. And when you've got that philosophy that was left behind by Ian Everett, that was a really, really worrying sign. But there was a period, not so long ago, like I say, 5 or 6 weeks, where Barrow were playing good football and were being very, very much respected by opposition managers for the type of football they were playing. So with that still relatively fresh in the memory, this is a bit of a surprise, but I guess everybody's getting spooked by that table now that Southend are showing signs of life and Scunthorpe have got out of it in recent weeks.
Yeah, well, not much continuity for David Dunn, but plenty for his Wikipedia page anyway at the moment. So that'll be filling up nicely. We'll talk, I'm sure, about their replacements over the coming weeks. Hopefully, they don't decide to bring the new men in just 20 minutes before we're about to record a podcast. But we'll see how they get on. And maybe next week we'll have news for both Barrow and Bradford City supporters. Right, let's move on to the main subject of today's podcast then, Mike. We are heading to the Championship and we're heading to Bedfordshire, to Kenilworth Road to be precise, and a man who's in his second stint at the club, Nathan Jones. He almost guided them to promotion in League One before opting to go and join the bright lights of Stoke City in the Championship. Mick Harford did a decent steering job in getting them over the line. Didn't quite work out at the 3-6-5. He then went back with sort of his tail between his legs and replaced his namesake Graham Jones. But the second stint is working out rather well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think in this regard, I think him walking out on Luton to go to Stoke, making a load of mistakes at Stoke and coming back is all the better for Luton. I think this is one of those things where had he stayed in place for the first stint and seen it out, I don't think that necessarily the momentum would have continued. And you know, when you lose your fullbacks, for example, in the diamond system that they were playing, him coming back with a fresh mindset has given him a new set of problems. And I think that the previous cycle might have run its course potentially, whereas now it's a complete wipe the slate clean and start again in this second stint. And he's learnt so much, made so many mistakes at Championship level already at Stoke's expense, that I think now that Luton stand to benefit.
So is he the sort of man, we'll delve more into his personality type over the next few minutes, but is he the sort of person who does learn from mistakes quite easily? Because we see a lot of managers who are very stubborn in the game, but Nathan Jones, is he fairly malleable as a result? Because he clearly has taken a few things on board, hasn't he, from his disastrous reign at Stoke?
Yeah, I do think he's very strong on his own personal development. So yeah, I would say he's the sort of person that reflects on mistakes, which is not necessarily common for people of his personality type. He's quite a relentless character, and sometimes people go headlong into things without thinking or stopping to reflect. But I think he's very driven to succeed, and along with that comes, you can't succeed if you never stop to reflect. And I do think he is the type of manager that knows it's a crucial element of what he needs to do, is that he needs to learn from his own mistakes along the way. And he sees everything very much as, a journey. And he talks a lot about journeys, and mistakes are all part of that journey. And, so I do think he's the sort of bloke that is liable to reflect and make good out of bumps in the road along the way.
We talked last week about Lee Johnson. You can obviously go back and listen to episode 8, Lee Johnson and Darren Ferguson. Lee Johnson, you described, and I don't think this came as a surprise to anyone, as a workaholic. Is Nathan Jones cut from that same cloth? Because he does seem a manager who's very busy all of the time.
Yeah, very much so. He is a servant. When I think of Nathan Jones, I can't separate him from religion. He's a very religious man. And I think it just comes across in his personality that he's got this real devout faith in everything he does. And that, he doesn't question things. He doesn't, he doesn't sort of deal in cold, hard facts. He deals in feeling and faith in things and the way things should be all the time. I just think that kind of colours his personality, full stop. He basically, I don't think he does things for himself. I just think he's a relentless worker. And, he's not big on ego, which might be a surprise considering that it was quite a selfish move for him to go to Stoke. And that probably was driven by ego. But I think he feels like he's got a purpose in life that's been, he has to fulfill this role that he's been given in life. And it's not about him. It's about what he's been chosen to do and the positions he's been put in, and he's on this journey. And I think that's basically what it is this relentless drive comes from the fact that it's not about him and his ego, and he never gets upset about things. He never takes anything personal. He's all about the cause, and he's all about following this purpose that he feels he's been given.
We hear lots of analysis, and some of it is a touch lazy when you hear pundits say, they're made for this club. This is the perfect match between manager and football team. Now, it has been said about Nathan Jones at Luton several times already. What is it about Luton and this setup and the players that makes Nathan Jones succeed? Because there's a myriad of reasons why it went wrong at Stoke, and we'll delve into a few of those in a second. But what is it about Luton and the atmosphere and everything surrounding the club that just kind of makes Nathan Jones tick?
I think Luton is a club that has, because of its experiences over the last 10 to 15 years, I guess there's possibly a bit of an inbuilt siege mentality there anyway, because of the way they were treated by the Football League and when they were relegated and all the points deductions and everything that they went through, having to spend that time in non-league. They come out of the non-league and, it's kind of, I guess in the sense of just getting back into the Football League, that chapter was over. But this is a club that's got a cause inbuilt within itself that to rail against something and it's quite an emotional club it has become. And I think it was just tailor-made for someone like Jones to take it by the scruff of the neck, give him time and space to build something. And he has built what the Luton we see today now has been pretty much built by him in terms of the recruitment and the culture of the players and who survived in the dressing room under his tenure is a certain personality type, is a certain strength of character there running right through the dressing room. And so he's had the time and patience to build it in League Two. But once he gets something going, it's like we talk about how relentless he is. There's this sheer momentum behind him that, you talk about logic coming from League Two. The Championship's no barrier. He will be targeting the Premier League in the next few years. There's no ceiling or no limits to what he thinks can be achieved, because he doesn't just go by basic logic and what applies to other people. He thinks I think he believes he's capable of anything.
So one thing that Luton fans keep mentioning, certainly about this season, is that there is that over-reliance on James Collins up front. And understandably, Hatters fans, ones that I've seen on social media, but also one or two that I've actually talked to in person, so I'm not just reflecting the vast overreaction that you get on Twitter, seem to be concerned about the lack of firepower in the squad outside of Collins, who stepped up to the Championship brilliantly, by the way. And I just wondered, is this something that would worry Nathan Jones? Because you've just talked about the sheer belief that he has in the system and in the players and everything that is going on at the club. Is that likely to worry Jones, or is he the sort of person who will just brush that aside and say, well, we've got something working here, I don't care about that?
I think this possibly goes back to my point about cycles and the fact that he went away and made some mistakes and learned about the Championship with Stoke. He's come back and, those marauding fullbacks have gone, so the diamond system kind of had to go with it. They found that out under Graham Jones. Nathan did dabble with it when he came back briefly, but he's come back more pragmatic and realistic about what the Championship entails now. Whereas I think those mistakes he might have been, with his relentless nature, he might have pushed on through the difficult times with the diamond or with inferior players in those key positions, and it never would have worked out, and it, things might have spiraled in a way that, his time would have come to a natural end. Whereas because he's had to come back and be more pragmatic, it's almost like it is a reset and a new chapter now. And I think in time, because it took him 2 or 3 seasons to get Luton to the level that they were at in League One, which was absolutely formidable. It might take him the same amount of time again at Championship level to recreate something as formidable. But in the meantime, I think he's learned new ways to be pragmatic now and to be a bit more defensive minded, play with the handbrake on a little bit more and do things a slightly different way to just kind of get a foothold in the division and consolidate.
Is he the sort of manager who deals with, because a lot of the players at Luton seem very grounded. You've got a lot of players who were there during the early days in League Two and the recent years of League One and League Two. And then you've got a lot of players as well who are also trying to make it on loan from Premier League sides, or players who maybe have just needed their career kick-started. My general feeling was that when he was at Stoke, there were maybe, and this is not just Nathan Jones, but it's happened to numerous managers, there was maybe too many egos at work, maybe too many cliques, that sort of thing. Is he the sort of person who doesn't particularly deal well with that? Does he need everybody absolutely on side 100%?
Yeah, I do think he needs everybody on side. It's all about culture. He sets a culture. He doesn't necessarily micromanage people. He creates a culture. Everybody has to follow that culture or they get cut adrift. He never got a chance to go through that process at Stoke and really decide, right, who's with me and who's not, who's buying into this culture. But it's noticeable that when he left Luton, Mick Harford said it, even Graham Jones said it when he came in, the dressing room was self-policing. You know, it was the strength of character in that dressing room and the standards that they held each other to were so strong. And that culture that Jones had put in place was so strong that Luton were able to carry on without him. And I think that was possibly part of his thinking when he left, was that what he'd built could take care of itself. And he possibly saw a quicker route to the Premier League with a club that had the resources, only to find out that you can't just walk into any club and do what he did at Luton and get the time to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff of who's going to buy into, you know, what I demand on a day-to-day basis, that you can walk into clubs like that and these bigger egos and people who are going to contest you, and he'll meet that conflict head on. And he did at Stoke, but it led him to a point where there was a point of no return, basically, because he'd probably made so many enemies behind the scenes that he was never going to get his own way with every single player that he wanted out. Yeah,
and it's hard when you've got such a big squad to manage. A lot of waifs and strays in that Stoke squad, and actually Michael O'Neill, who I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes, has done a commendable job on trying to sort out the mess that was there at Stoke. Nathan Jones, then, personalised type. We've explored a few avenues. Is there anything else that is noticeable, Mike, about how he operates?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the main thing is he's very much. It's all about collective energy, emotional energy. It's about everybody's a part of it, the fans included. I think even the way he played it when he came back was, he was very much kind of pleading for forgiveness, I suppose. Like you said, was dead right. He tail between his legs when he came back. I think the fact he shuffled back in through the door during lockdown when there wasn't any fans around, he got a chance to kind of win the fans back over from a distance. Before they come back into the stadium, possibly helped and played a little part in it all. But I think the fans are a big part of what he's trying to do. It's very much about, board level, everyone behind the scenes, the dressing room culture, but also the fans feeling part of something. And, he's been very honest since he came back. And I think that, that will be a big part of Luton going forward as well, is the fact that the fans are back on side. I think even though it's possibly, was it the second smallest capacity in the Championship, it's going to be one of the most intense atmospheres when we get back to full stadia. I think it's going to be, few teams will feed off the energy of their own fans more than Luton do.
So we know that he doesn't really need to micromanage the squad, and that as you say, that you use the word self-policing for the squad. What's he like on the training ground on a day-to-day basis? I imagine he's right there, and I imagine he's a bundle of energy, and I imagine he's having a right good go at his players. Is that how you think it plays out?
Yeah, I possibly, yeah. I think basically, we talk about the emotional side and all of that, but I think it should also be said is that he's very driven on the coaching side. I think it's clear from stories and people that have worked with him in the past at Brighton, or, anybody that's come into contact with him early in his coaching career has basically said, this guy's going on to big things. He's so intense and he's so quick on, wanting to know the latest developments of the game and, how to put on sessions and the tactical side of the game. And I don't think that necessarily suits people of his personality type to be so, obsessed with the attention to detail that he is. So I think he's got a good balance in that, it's not only what comes natural to him is an ability, his flow state is an ability to get people to dance to his tune in a sort of in a collective manner, but also his attention to detail. Like, he doesn't micromanage players, but I think he is wants to have a handle on all the little details when it comes to the tactical side of things. And I mean, only a few podcasts ago, we were talking about Neil Harris, similar personality type, but the attention to detail and tactical detail isn't necessarily there. I'd say that's possibly what separates him from Nathan Jones, is that when it comes to the tactical side of the game, he's very keen on, and not in a way that he thinks he knows it all, in a way that he wants to learn and he wants to get better and better all the time.
Just to sort of flipping and flopping between his career here, but I just want to go back to Stoke, and they're a side that I saw a lot of in the season under Nathan Jones, or the half season under Nathan Jones. Was doing some commentaries there, and so I saw his setups quite a lot. And one thing I noticed was he did try and deploy the diamond system to start with. It had mixed results, mainly negative, and then he chopped and changed the system quite a lot. And I think players, and I think certainly the fans, didn't quite know what was coming out each game. Often with Luton now, I think for most fans, when it comes to 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, can probably just about guess the lineup and can guess the system. Whereas at Stoke, it was so unpredictable that you had to be on your guard for 7 changes. If you're frantically jotting down the team sheet at 5-3, like I was ahead of kickoff, you were anticipating 8 or 9 changes on some occasions. Do you think he was influenced perhaps by, this didn't work, so I need to completely rip it up and start again? Do you think that was panic mode for Nathan Jones, or was he just kind of just being a little bit experimental, do you think?
I think more than experimental, it was possibly about trust in people, and it was the system came second, I would imagine. I think that he was basically monitoring the reactions of his players and how much he thought his players were buying in from one week to the next, and who was on side the most, and basically who deserved to be in the team most as people at that particular moment. So the fact he was making so many changes spoke volumes of how little of a handle he had on that dressing room at the time. And he was. The system would have came second. I think with Nathan Jones, I think he's probably the sort of manager that needs 1 or 2 systems and stick to it to get the best results, because then he can really hyper focus on managing those dynamics of the emotions of the players and the collective buy-in and everything that goes alongside getting those players' emotional needs met, making sure that the 11 he sends out on a particular day are in, the best possible space to deliver their best possible performance. Everybody's on the same page with the same game plan. I don't think he's a sort of manager that wants to worry about the opposition. He much prefers to generate this momentum of a single game plan, and it doesn't matter if you put Liverpool in front of us, we'll beat them if we bring our A game. And that's his kind of mentality, is to generate this force that nobody else can be a match for once we get to this level that we want to get to. So it's that reinforcement of the same tactical identity that his teams will always be better in that scenario. The fact he was changing systems and chopping things up so much at Stoke was just an indication of how little handle he could get on the job at the beginning, and just how much he was fighting fires at that in those early stages.
Well, Nathan Jones, of course, hasn't lost many games as the Luton boss at all. He's lost no more than 2 in a row this season. And during that sensational League One promotion campaign, and obviously the same for League Two as well, he's not used to losing runs, is he? And maybe that was playing in the back of his mind. He hasn't really at any point during his relatively brief managerial career had to go through, 3 or 4 games in which his side have picked up just a single point, or 3 or 4 consecutive defeats in a row. So maybe because it was brand new territory, do you think that also was just playing on his mind a little bit?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't think he's possibly the sort of manager that takes, no manager takes losing well, but I think when something's wrong, I think he's very outcome focused. So if outcomes aren't good, something must be wrong, even if nothing's wrong or things are going in the right direction. He won't take small victories within defeats. It's a defeat. It's all about the outcome as far as he's concerned. So something must be wrong. I've got to get to the bottom of what it is that is wrong. And if that means putting noses out of joint and being really blunt and not very nice to people, then that's what I have to be, because the outcomes need to change. So I think, it was just a powder keg scenario at Stoke. It was, had they have let him have his own way and give him the time, I think he would have got it right eventually. And I think Stoke would have come out of it with, it's hypothetical, I suppose, because he might never have got on top of it, and we could be now a year or two later, and it would have only got worse and worse and worse because it would have caused more and more damage. But I think, it was a hiding to nothing in the sense, because there was so much wrong there, and he was only adding fuel to the fire in the way that he manages dressing rooms and what he demands of players.
Well, Nathan Jones has a couple of tricky games to negotiate as the Luton boss. Coming up, they travel to Borough and then they are hosting Bournemouth. So with back-to-back home wins and 3 goals each of those games, we'll see how Luton react. Before we continue then, Mike, and we look at our second manager, which will be MK Dons' Russell Martin. Just a quick word, if you can, on what the Foxpunter can offer.
Yeah, well, basically, there's a case study going up soon. It's basically going to outline my my strategy for betting on a Saturday afternoon at the moment. I put a lot of thought into it. What's the optimum way to play on a Saturday? To give yourself the potential to win big, and but also basically create good long-term habits as a punter, and develop good habits that will serve you well in the long run and give you the best chance of being long-term profitable. So that's a free case study that's going to be going up soon. So, keep your eyes out for that. And
with so much football, it's coming thick and fast over the festive period, isn't it? I'm sure you'll have lots of tips up over the next few weeks. You've been quite busy with your Saturday, Tuesdays, even some Sunday tips as well this week. So if you'd like to get your hands on those, and of course, maybe even join the Thursday night hangout and all the XG tables, there's loads on there. Foxpunter.com, and of course you can follow us on social media as well. Our second manager today is Russell Martin of MK Dons. Now, not been a manager for long and remains one of the youngest. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the youngest. Don't think the youngest, but one of the youngest in the Football League. He's done pretty well since taking over at MK Dons. The jury was out when he arrived. MK Dons have been there before with young, unproven managers, but Russell Martin certainly has hit the ground running. And Mike, it's one of those appointments that you kind of wouldn't have expected to go quite so right, but he's helped by Luke Williams being there, and the kind of football they've been playing has been excellent.
Yeah, they're very high up in performance data terms, and they in terms of XG ratio, they're projecting as one of the best teams in League One. Now, how much this has got to do, obviously, results aren't measuring up at the moment this season, in so much that they're falling behind so often in games in the first 20 minutes of matches. And it's kind of a ridiculous sort of statistic relative to everyone else that I think it's 12 goals they've conceded in the first 20 minutes of matches now this season. And it's putting them on the back foot in almost every game. But I do believe that, the signs are there that this, that they are, they've got big potential with Martin at the helm.
Yeah, I'm just having a look actually, and they've conceded within 16 minutes in 5 of their last 6 games. So yeah, really slow starts, but they're not necessarily falling apart after that. There's Russell Martin has been helped by some wily assistants, and he signed some very experienced players as well. What else does Russell Martin bring to the table then?
Yeah, well, I think the big issue here is because he's such a process manager, and I think what he did so well when he came in at the beginning, early on last season, replacing Paul Tisdale, was the fact that confidence couldn't have been lower at the time in that dressing room. It was, they were promoted from League Two, and Tisdale seemed to set the bar at let's go for the top 6, and that's the standards we can meet. And because they had such a poor start to the season and were bottom of the league, or certainly in the relegation places, that confidence took such a hit because what the initial target was so far away. And you just thought this is going to be a long, hard struggle. And what Martin did particularly well was that he basically handed over the process to the players and said, right, okay, what is it that's going to make you feel comfortable within matches? Let's sit down together. Let's go through team meetings. Let's see how you want to play, and let's play the type of football that you want to play. And, they basically worked together on a process that was around playing out from the back and playing a brand of passing football and possession football. And he kind of, by handing over ownership to the players, he got the turnaround that he needed. And I think this is a big part of his skill set, is his ability to empathise with players and understand what's going on for them, and kind of just make them feel empowered. Now, he was clever enough in the summer to understand that there was a lot of naivety last season, and he needed to recruit some experience, and he's brought some good experienced heads in. But like I say, what's happening is they're playing this brand of football that now is, they're playing out from the back, and then because it's so early in the process, they're making loads of mistakes, particularly at the beginning of games. I think they're jittery about just how risky the football they're playing is in front of their own defensive line. and teams are pouncing on it. Teams are just identifying it that, you know, they're not well skilled at this yet, and they're just going to press them high very quickly. And even this weekend against Burton, they were, you know, Burton. Russell Martin said it in his post-match interview that we've watched Burton for the last 5 games, and they've sat off teams, let them have the ball, and, you know, let's see if you can break us down. And it'd been very good at it, and it was working very well for Burton. But against MK Dons, they surprised them because he came to press them in the first 20 minutes because they knew that so many teams had so much joy with it. Even though it's not our style, why don't we give it a go? And they were ahead within, you know, 10, 15 minutes of taking the lead again. And, you know, Russell Martin's tearing his hair out now because I think it's easy to say, you know, if you just wipe out the first 20-minute goals, but, you know, if they could get to 20 minutes at 0-0 in every game, we're looking at a team that would be in the top 6 now, you know, rather in the bottom half of the table. But the standards are setting performance-wise once they settle into games. They're almost as good as anything in the division, I believe, because, you know, just reading between the lines of what opposition managers are saying.
So does Russell Martin, do you think, and obviously he's still very early days, as we've mentioned, into his managerial career, does he have the ability to change things, to mix things up, or do you think he'll be a bit of a slave to this system?
I think he's a long-term thinker, and I think he's got a long-term vision in mind that you know, that you will only get there if you stick to it and you execute it and you don't deviate from the process. So as far as these teething troubles go, listen, we can make the comparison here with Pep Guardiola and playing out from the back, because I think we're talking the same personality type. And you think back to the early days of Pep Guardiola at Manchester City, Claudio Bravo playing out from the back, and every week people are asking him, are you going to ditch this style of football? And, you know, you're asking Pep Guardiola, are you going to ditch your style? You know, he's had so much success with it. You know, why is he going to ditch it? Because of half a season in English football. And, you know, obviously in the long run, it's proved well-founded. I think we've seen enough signs of what MK Dons are doing after this first 20-minute period. Once they settle into games against almost any team, they're literally dictating, you know, on a level that probably would have been hard to foresee at the beginning of the season, you know, before the season started. So I think there's big things potentially in the pipeline there, and I think, you know, that they're definitely going to be a team for the future at this level. You know, so long as they stick with this process and they can just the confidence doesn't take too much of a hiding over continually playing catch up in games and always being in chase mode and being stretched for that.
So we know that he's pretty good with the players and is able to hand over responsibility to them. Does some of that come from him having so many years captaining the Norwich side, so he was able to work out how different personalities tick and how the team are able to, you know, to all fight for the same cause? Will that have played into his thinking here?
I think it's a flow state for him, so I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with his career. I just think he's got a natural ability to put himself in the minds of other people. And I know this, you know, from personality typologies. He would have an interesting personality typology because, you know, it's the same flow state I use. I know, you know, I go to live events, like I go to events learning on courses of this, and it's, you know, the room is full of people that use this process, that, you know, that like to understand what goes on in people's minds and have this real passion for psychology. So I think that's just a flow state for Martin, that it's there. But I also think that what makes me believe as well that he's a character that's got a big managerial career ahead of him is because of his playing career. And it's because of the fact that he's been at 3 or 4 different clubs. He's won promotion with 3 different clubs, I think it is. Wycombe, Peterborough, or possibly 4. Norwich multiple times, and then MK Dons when he first arrived under Tisdale. He's played in back 3, he's played in a back 4, he's played as a full-back, he's played as a centre-back. I think he's even played in midfield. To be a captain to rack up so many hundreds of games, so many of them as a captain, to be you know, well thought of at all of these clubs, but a legend at Norwich. Yeah, not really on, you know, all provincial clubs. So he's never been on the media's radar on a national level. He's not the sort of player that we automatically outside of those clubs would identify with. And, you know, he's just been a long servant of a player that you think, oh, he's a loyal player, a bit of a utility man. He's captained to so many promotions, played in so many different types of dressing rooms, played so many different roles in so many different systems. there's almost nothing he doesn't know about the game that he hasn't got real world experience of, that, he can't call upon in a situation. And, that I think the fact he was a captain, at most of these clubs as well, speaks to the fact that he can empathise in a dressing room and he can understand what's going on for different players at different times. Those connections of who needs an arm around the shoulder, as the old cliche goes, and which one needs a rollicking. I think these are natural skill sets for him that went hand in hand with his captaincy. You marry it to all the promotions and all the understanding of so many different systems. And I just think if you can think of a playing CV that's destined to be a top quality manager, I think Russell Martin has got that CV.
And talking of the media, he does seem to have a good relationship with them as well. He's very interesting to listen to. At first, I thought he wasn't quite so engaging, but the more he's kind of been pressed on his ideas and his system and the way he works, he's a thinker, but he's able to articulate it quite well, isn't he?
Yeah, he does. He likes to unpack the process, and it's fascinating for, when you're listening to so many manager interviews, not many of them do unpack the process to the same degree and will, expose themselves basically and expose what I was thinking when I made that decision, why I made that decision, why it might have been a mistake, and basically unpack it in front of the microphone, and he's very good on that level. And you can tell, he thinks long and hard about, the decisions he makes, and he's not afraid to open himself up to anybody, in that sense, because I think he sees most situations as a learning opportunity. So I think if he keeps thoughts to himself or he keeps things to himself and doesn't articulate this kind of stuff, then he might miss an opportunity to just say something that sparks an idea in his head that, might be a solution to a problem that he's got. So I think that's part of it as well.
And he always seems to be trying to learn, doesn't he, and move forward and take that next step. So the future does seem quite bright for him, as you say, on a managerial level. You talked about how Nathan Jones will, earlier in the podcast, will aim for the Premier League. Russell Martin, will he be doing similar? Will he be looking towards the sky?
It's possibly too early to say, but with MK Dons, he's probably at the right club that will give him time. I think Pete Winkelman has, been known to always give managers time. He's never been trigger happy, and he's always, he's got that side to it. He's going to need time to get this process across and get it fine tuned and get to the level he wants to be at. So, I think ultimately the stature of the club might hold them back, in terms of Premier League. But for as long as it's at MK Dons, I would imagine that in the next few years, MK Dons will be a championship club with Russell Martin at the helm.
So keep our eye on MK Dons over the next few weeks and their habit of conceding early goals, and see if they can keep it tight for the first 20 going forward. Before we leave you, though, it's time for some any other business. We didn't do this last week. It wasn't a whole lot that caught your eye, but I believe, Mike, today something in League Two has just piqued your interest.
Yeah, I'm really pleased for Mark Molesley, and I say that as somebody who's Southend's 81st minute winner, was it yesterday? Cost me as a 0-0 backer in that game. But I just think he's been dealt such a terrible hand, and all of a sudden it looks like he might have a fighting chance of trying to get Southend out of trouble and trying to do himself justice. I thought it was going to be a real crying shame, because I think it's been evident in recent weeks that the players are absolutely digging deep for him, and they're all fully backing him. He's getting 90-minute performances out of a very, very limited set of players. And all of a sudden now, the transfer embargo has been lifted just a couple of hours before kickoff this weekend. And, he's basically 2 players suddenly available to him because that transfer embargo was lifted. The injuries are easing up. And I just think that, the manner that Southend have been competing in recent weeks suggests, I just thought it was going to be a shame that they could have been cut adrift, and we never, Molesley, without ever doing anything wrong, could have just disappeared without a trace, sacked from his first job. Nobody ever hears of him again. And we see it all too often. There's managers that don't necessarily do a bad job in the first job, but you only last a few months and you've got this record points per game ratio or whatever it might be, whichever way you want to look at it. It just looks terrible. And good luck getting a second job, because you probably won't. Well, at least now I think Molesley's given himself a fighting chance. And I think it's one he more than deserves, because you talk about character and how much players are working for a manager and a work ethic. and I think it's there in abundance with Southend. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks whether they can, get themselves within touching distance and possibly clambering clear.
Yeah, it could get very competitive down there, couldn't it? And Mark Molesley has always remained upbeat. He's always remained positive, but there must have been times when he's looked at the situation and thought, my goodness me, what have I got myself into? But very, very pleased, like you, Mike, for Mark Molesley and Southend's victory at the weekend, a late victory over Scunthorpe. All right, that is it. We are out of time. We're back in 7 days' time, though, where we'll be putting 2 more managers under the microscope. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And, of course, you can go back and listen to any of the previous 8 episodes. I know Christmas is a very busy time, but if you just want a few hours off from the relatives and the endless Christmas TV, then go back and have a listen. We've got the likes of Pep Guardiola, Marcelo Bielsa, and, of course, our very first episode, which was Chris Hughton, as Mike mentioned before as well, Neil Harris, another man who's been under our microscope. As always, Mike, thank you very much for your company.
Pleasure, Jack.
And we'll do it all again next week.